You have a full acre of land sitting right outside your door, and you're still handing the grocery store $700, $900, maybe even $1,200 of your hard-earned money every single month. That is not a budget problem. That is not a soil problem. That is not a climate problem. That is a layout problem. And today I am going to fix it for you, permanently. 1 acre is more land than 90% of the farms that fed entire families for centuries. The problem isn't what you have, it's how it's arranged. There's a zone-based layout strategy that turns your single acre into a year-round food machine. Vegetables, fruit, eggs, meat, honey, herbs. Every single month, every single season. Without spending a dime on food, you could be growing yourself. By the end of this video, I'm walking you through the exact layout, zone by zone, so you can start mapping it onto your property this weekend. Let's go. Here's what's actually happening on most 1-acre homesteads right now. You've got a garden somewhere in one corner, a chicken coop somewhere else, maybe a couple of fruit trees scattered around with no real plan. And then, a massive chunk of your property is just grass. Mowed grass. Doing absolutely nothing for you except costing you time, fuel, and sweat every single week. Meanwhile, you are still spending $600, $800, maybe $1,200 a month on groceries. The USDA says the average family of four spends over $1,000 a month on food in 2025. That's $12,000 a year walking straight out of your household, and you are sitting on an entire acre of productive land. That is not a garden problem. That is a design problem. Most homesteaders plant without a layout strategy. The garden goes where it's convenient, not where it's productive. The coop gets built where there was space, not where the manure cycle feeds the soil. And the result? A homestead that works in pieces but never works as a system. You get tomatoes in July, nothing in January, eggs in spring, a slowdown in winter, a freezer full of one thing and an empty pantry of everything else. The gaps are where your money leaks out, and today we seal every single one of those gaps. Here's something most people don't realize. The idea of zoning a small farm for maximum output isn't new, it's ancient. Before industrial agriculture turned farming into rows of monocrops and giant machines, small landholders across Europe, Asia, and Africa designed their properties in concentric zones, the most labor-intensive crops closest to the house, livestock in the middle ring, perennial food forest and forage on the outer edges. Every single zone fed into the next one. Kitchen scraps fed chickens, chicken manure composted into garden fertilizer, garden waste fed rabbits, rabbit manure fed worms, worms fed the soil. The soil grew more food. It was a closed loop, and it worked on as little as half an acre. This isn't theory. This is how families survived for centuries, without grocery stores, without refrigerated trucks, without a single external input. Then industrial agriculture told us farming was about scale. Bigger fields, bigger machines, bigger inputs. And suddenly the idea that 1 acre could feed a family year-round seemed ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. It's forgotten. Permaculture designers picked this ancient knowledge back up in the 1970s and formalized it into zone-based design, but the principles go back thousands of years. And the reason it works so brilliantly on 1 acre is because at that scale everything is close enough to integrate. Your garden feeds your animals. Your animals feed your soil. Your soil feeds your garden. Nothing is wasted. Nothing sits idle. The layout I'm about to show you is built on those exact ancient principles, adapted for a modern homestead with a modern goal. Free food all year from 1 acre. If you want a homestead that actually feeds you instead of draining your wallet, subscribe right now and hit that bell. Because the zone-by-zone layout I'm about to break down is going to completely change the way you see your property. Let's get into it. Oh, Zone 1, the kitchen garden. This is your highest traffic, highest output zone, and it sits within 30 feet of your back door. Why so close? Because the crops here need daily attention, and if they're not within arm's reach, you simply won't tend them. That's not laziness, that's human nature. This is where you grow your daily use vegetables, lettuce, herbs, tomatoes, peppers, greens, radishes, green onions, the stuff you reach for every single meal. Fresh, free, 30 steps from your kitchen. The secret to making Zone 1 produce all year is succession planting. You're not putting in one round of lettuce in spring and calling it done. You plant a new row every 2 weeks from March through October. When one row finishes, the next one is already producing. And in winter, you throw a simple cold frame over your bed. Nothing fancy. See just an old window resting on a wooden box. And you're still pulling spinach, kale, and arugula in January, in the dead of winter, from your own backyard. I grew over 200 pounds of food from a single 4 by 16-foot raised bed last year using this method. That is one bed on 1 acre. You have room for 8 to 10 of these. Place your compost bin right at the edge of Zone 1. Kitchen scraps walk straight from your counter to the bin, to the bed. No wasted steps, no wasted nutrients. The loop closes right here. But Zone 1 only handles your vegetables. The next zone is where your calories really start stacking up. Zone 2, the perennial food forest. This zone sits just beyond your kitchen garden, roughly 30 to 80 feet from the house. And this is where your food production goes on absolute autopilot. A food forest is a layered planting system. Tall fruit trees on top, apple, pear, plum, peach. Below those, smaller trees like fig and mulberry. Below those, berry bushes, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, currants. Below those, ground cover crops like strawberries and clover. Every single layer produces food, and once established, a food forest requires almost zero maintenance. No tilling, no replanting every season, no daily watering after the first 2 years. Your trees keep producing year after year, decade after decade, while you do essentially nothing. Here's what the numbers look like. A single mature apple tree produces 200 to 400 pounds of fruit per year. One pear tree gives you 150 to 300 pounds. A row of blackberry bushes, 10 to 20 pounds per plant per season. On just a quarter-acre of food forest, and that's all you need from your 1 acre, you're producing thousands of pounds of fruit and berries every single year. For free, forever. And here's what most people completely miss. The windfall, the bruised fruit, the fallen stuff you won't eat, that goes straight to your chickens and your compost. Nothing is wasted. The food forest is the engine of year-round production. But the next zone is where your protein comes from. Zone 3, the egg and poultry station. And placement here matters more than most people think. This zone sits directly adjacent to your food forest and your compost system. Your chickens are workers. Their job isn't just laying eggs, it's pest control, soil scratching, and manure production. 6 hens on 1 acre is the sweet spot. That gives you 4 to 6 eggs a day, roughly 1,500 eggs per year. At current store prices, that's $600 to $900 worth of eggs you are no longer buying. Gone from your grocery bill. Just like that. Use a confined run with a deep litter system. Let the bedding build up over months. The chickens turn it. It composts in place, and twice a year you clean it out and dump it straight into your garden beds. Free fertilizer worth $150 to $180 a year, minimum. And I'll be completely honest with you. I used to let my chickens free range across my entire property. They destroyed my garden in 2 flat weeks. They ate seedlings, scratched up beds, and undid months of work in days. Confined runs with rotational access to specific zones is how you get all the benefits without any of the chaos. Feed costs stay low because your food forest drops fruit. Your garden produces scraps, and your worm bin supplies protein. These birds barely touch commercial feed. But eggs aren't your only protein source. The next zone handles that. Zone 4, the Rabbit and Worm Integration Hub. And this one honestly surprised me the most when I first built it out. Rabbits convert 4 pounds of feed into 1 pound of meat. That is the best feed conversion ratio of any common homestead livestock. Better than chickens, better than pigs, way better than cattle. A breeding trio, 1 buck, 2 does, produces 40 to 60 pounds of offspring per year in a space smaller than a garden shed. That's 120 to 180 pounds of clean, lean, high-quality meat annually from a footprint of about 30 square feet. They're silent, no crowing, no neighbor complaints. And in most suburban areas where chickens are restricted, rabbits are perfectly legal. But here is where the integration magic happens. Rabbit manure is cold manure. You do not have to compost it. It goes straight onto garden beds without burning plants. And it is one of the single richest natural fertilizers on the planet. Stack a worm bin directly underneath your rabbit hutches. The manure drops in, the worms process it, and you get vermicompost and worm castings that will absolutely supercharge your soil. Plus, surplus worms become high-protein chicken feed. Rabbits feed the worms feed the soil feeds the garden. Garden scraps feed the rabbits. You're not managing separate systems. You are running one machine, and the next zone adds even more fuel to that machine. Zone 5, the bee corridor. And I want you to understand something. Bees don't just make honey. They make everything else on your acre produce more. Place 2 hives right along the border between your food forest and your garden directly in the flight path of every flowering crop on your property. One single hive produces 30 to 60 pounds of honey per year. That is your sweetener, no more buying sugar or honey at the store. But the real value is pollination. Studies show that pollinated crops produce 30 to 50% more fruit than unpollinated ones. That means your apple trees, your berry bushes, your squash, your tomatoes, all of them are producing significantly more food every single season because those bees are working them every single day. 2 hives on 1 acre is plenty. Startup cost is around $300 to $500. Annual maintenance is minimal, a few inspections per season, harvesting once or twice a year. And the bonus products stack up fast. Beeswax for candles and balms, propolis for natural medicine, pollen for nutrition. Each one is something you'd otherwise buy at the store or something you can sell at the farmer's market. The bees don't take up a single square foot of usable growing space. They enhance every square foot around them. That is what makes them essential, not optional. Zone 6, the Preservation and Storage Station. And listen closely here because this is the zone most people completely skip, and it is the exact reason why they end up drowning in zucchini in August and buying canned beans in February. Growing food all year means absolutely nothing if you can't store it. This zone is a dedicated space. It can be a corner of your garage, a root cellar, or even a converted closet designed specifically for food preservation and long-term storage. You need 3 systems here: canning for fruits, vegetables, and sauces, dehydrating for herbs, jerky, and fruit leather, and root cellaring for potatoes, carrots, beets, onions, and winter squash. A basic pressure canner costs $80. A food dehydrator costs $50. A root cellar can be built from a buried trash can for under $20. Total setup, around $150. These are not luxuries. These are the bridge between your summer surplus and your winter table. Without them, you're stuck in a cycle of feast and famine. With them, you eat from your own land 12 months a year. I put up over 300 jars last season from 1 acre. Tomato sauce, pickled beets, apple butter, dried herbs, frozen berries. My grocery bill from November through March was under $40 a month for a family of 4. Zone 7, the perimeter forage and mulching ring. And this is the zone most homesteaders ignore entirely, which is a massive mistake because this is the one that makes the entire system sustainable long-term. Your outer perimeter, the edges of your acre, should be planted with fast-growing, multi-purpose plants. Comfrey, mulberry, moringa if your climate allows, and nitrogen-fixing trees like black locust or autumn olive. These plants serve 3 critical functions. 1. They produce biomass for mulch. Comfrey alone can be cut 4 to 5 times per year and laid directly on garden beds as a rich, thick, nutrient-dense mulch. That replaces store-bought mulch entirely. 2. They produce animal feed. Comfrey leaves, mulberry fruit, and moringa are all high-protein feeds for your chickens and rabbits. You're growing your own feed on land that would otherwise just be a fence line. 3. They act as windbreaks and privacy screens, protecting your inner zones from wind damage and reducing moisture loss in your beds. This ring costs almost nothing to establish. Comfrey grows from root cuttings. Mulberry grows from cuttings. You can plant an entire perimeter for under $30 in materials, and once it's established, it keeps producing for decades without replanting. Free mulch, free feed, free protection, forever. I want to tell you exactly how I know this layout works, because I didn't always do it this way. 3 years ago, my homestead was a mess. And I don't mean a charming, rustic kind of mess. I mean an inefficient, money-bleeding, deeply frustrating mess. My garden was on the south side of the property. My chickens were on the north side. My fruit trees were scattered wherever I thought they'd look nice. My compost pile was so far from the kitchen that I stopped walking scraps to it by October every single year. And my rabbits were tucked behind the garage where I'd forget to check on them for days at a time. I was growing food, sure, but I was still spending over $700 a month on groceries. I was hauling manure across the yard in a wheelbarrow. I was losing fruit to birds because my chickens weren't anywhere near the trees. I was buying mulch by the truckload because I had nothing producing biomass on my perimeter. I was skeptical that rearranging everything would make a real difference. Moving a chicken coop, transplanting fruit trees. That sounded like a lot of work for a theory. But I did it anyway, one zone at a time over the course of one single winter. By the following summer, everything changed. My compost production tripled because it was finally close enough to use daily. My chickens were eating fallen fruit instead of commercial feed. My rabbit manure was dropping directly into worm bins. My perimeter comfrey was producing so much mulch, I was giving it away to neighbors. By the end of that first full year on the new layout, my grocery bill dropped to under $150 a month. Not because I was growing more food, I was growing roughly the same amount, but because nothing was being wasted. Nothing was falling through the cracks. Every single system was feeding the next one. Layout is not a minor detail. Layout is the entire difference between a homestead that costs you money and one that feeds you for free. Before you start rearranging your property, let me save you from the 4 mistakes I see homesteaders make over and over again. Mistake number 1, putting your garden far from the house. Every single extra step between your kitchen and your garden bed reduces how often you tend it. That is not laziness, that is human nature. If your salad greens are 200 feet away, you will skip harvesting them and grab something from the fridge instead. Zone 1 exists within 30 feet of your door for one reason. Proximity equals productivity. Mistake number 2, skipping the preservation zone entirely. You can grow a mountain of food in summer and still go hungry in winter if you have no system for storing it. I've watched people harvest 50 pounds of tomatoes in August and let half of them rot on the counter because they didn't have a canner set up and ready. Preservation is not optional. It is the bridge between abundance and year-round food security. Set up your canning and dehydrating station before your first big harvest, not after. Mistake number 3. Planting fruit trees without understanding spacing and sun exposure. Fruit trees need full sun, 6 to 8 hours minimum. I've seen beautiful apple trees planted in the shadow of a barn, producing almost nothing for 5 years. Map your sun exposure before you plant a single tree. Morning light matters. Afternoon shade kills production. Mistake number 4. Trying to build all 7 zones in one season. This layout is powerful, but it is not a weekend project. If you try to install everything at once, you will burn out by June and abandon half of it. Start with Zone 1 and Zone 3, your kitchen garden and your chickens. Get those running smoothly. Then add 1 new zone per season. Within 2 years, you will have the full system humming without ever once feeling overwhelmed. Here's what this layout looks like once every zone is established and running. You walk out your back door and harvest breakfast from Zone 1. Your chickens are already fed from yesterday's fallen fruit. Your rabbits are producing manure that's feeding worms that are building the soil that will grow your next crop. Your bees are pollinating everything in sight. Your perimeter is generating free mulch and free animal feed without you lifting a single finger. Your grocery bill drops to almost nothing, not because you're depriving yourself, but because your acre is producing more variety and more nutrition than the grocery store ever gave you. You stop worrying about supply chains. You stop flinching at food prices. You stop depending on systems you cannot control. 1 acre, designed intentionally, gives you something money genuinely cannot buy. Real independence. The kind where your land feeds your family no matter what happens outside your fence line. Now, I want to hear from you. Which zone are you setting up first? Are you starting with the kitchen garden, the chickens, the food forest? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one, and your experience might be exactly what another homesteader needs to hear. If this layout changed the way you see your property, subscribe and hit that bell. I post every week with practical systems designed for real homesteads, not fantasy farms on 200 acres you'll never own. Next video, I'm breaking down the exact planting calendar for a 1-acre homestead, month by month, zone by zone, exactly what to plant and when, so nothing sits empty and nothing goes to waste. You are going to want that one. Your acre is enough. It always was. You just needed the right layout to unlock it.